Long-term thinking is often thought as a genetic trait. Either you have it or you don't. But I don't think that's true. I believe long-term thinking is a skill. And like any skill, it can be practiced and refined over time. What I want to share here isn't just what to think over 30 years, but how long-term thinking actually works in real life, besides the obvious advice. Before I explain my system, I want to clarify what long-term thinking means to me. Because it's not about being cautious all the time, it's not about never taking a risk, and it's not about overthinking every single decision. To me, long-term thinking means optimizing for these three things: what compounds, what is reversible, and what keeps you in the game the longest. And that's it. Number 1, avoid irreversible damage first. Most people think that long-term thinking means making the right moves, but it usually starts with avoiding the wrong irreversible ones. Over a 30-year time horizon, progress is rarely destroyed by small mistakes. It's usually destroyed by things you can't undo. So the first principle is simple. Never trade temporary upside for permanent downside. This applies everywhere. I would never scam my audience. Not because it wouldn't make money, it might, but because it would permanently scar my reputation for a temporary upside. And I would never feel good about myself either. I don't gamble or trade speculative assets. Yes, the upside can look exciting, but the downside is erasing decades of progress. Long-term thinking isn't necessarily about never taking a risk. It's about being hard to permanently damage. 2, survivability beats vision. A lot of people might think that 30-year thinking means predicting the future, but it doesn't. It means surviving long enough for the future to matter. Health keeps options open, skills keeps options open, and reputation keeps options open. The goal isn't brilliance, the goal is staying in the game. Most great long-term outcomes are side effects of not being forced out early. 3, compounding over constant optimization. Short-term thinkers love optimization, whereas long-term thinkers respect compounding. Optimization in short bursts isn't bad, but when optimization becomes a lifestyle, it quietly eats at the future. You see it everywhere. Working 16-hour shifts, overtraining, and chasing profit over everything else. And it works briefly, until the costs show up. Those long days usually come with bad sleep, bad nutrition, and chronic stress. Overtraining eventually becomes a permanent injury. Chasing profit without restraint alienates customers and corrodes trust. Long-term thinking, on the other hand, looks a lot less impressive in the moment. 30 years of high-quality sleep, moderate training with no injuries, slow and steady business or investment growth. It's boring, but that's why it works. 4, resilience before intensity. One of the biggest long-term mistakes people make is going all out too early. They build systems that only work when everything goes right. Imagine investing all of your money with no savings, and then you lose your job due to an accident. You're forced to sell your assets at a loss just to be able to survive. If you invested slightly less and prioritized resilience first, you wouldn't have had to undo years of progress. The same principles apply physically. Imagine you and your friend train to improve your running. Your friend pushes to the absolute limit year after year. You take a slower approach. Planned moderate volume, strength training, and mobility work. At first, your friend is definitely beating you. But then one day, after years of pushing past his limits, he tears his Achilles and never fully recovers. You, on the other hand, keep running for another decade. You eventually set age group records, and your friend never fully comes back to running. The lesson isn't to never push yourself. The lesson is to make yourself harder to kill, literally and figuratively, before you try to go faster. Luck exists, and there's some people out there that might never get injured, but I would personally never want to stake my future on it. 5, identity is the longest feedback loop. Over a 30-year time horizon, habits matter, careers matter, Investments matter, but all of them operate through identity. Habits don't compound on their own. They compound by reinforcing the kind of person you believe yourself to be. Careers don't just shape your income, they shape what you consider normal, valuable, and worth your time. Investments don't just change your net worth. They change how you relate to risk, uncertainty, and patience. Every repeated choice strengthens a self-image. And once that self-image is formed, it begins to guide all future decisions automatically. That's the feedback loop. Over time, behavior creates identity. Identity then selects future behavior, often without conscious effort, which means that over 30 years, you don't just experience the outcomes of your habits, you experience the person they quietly turned you into. That's why long-term thinking isn't about strategy or optimization. It's about choosing the identities that you'd be willing to become, even after the results stop being exciting. 6. Your environment is a long-term multiplier. Long-term thinking has a lot to do with what you're surrounded by. Your environment quietly decides what feels normal, what feels difficult, and what feels unrealistic long before discipline ever gets involved. Over a 30-year time horizon, you don't rise to your goals, you sink to what your environment reinforces. If you surround yourself by people who normalize short-term thinking, unhealthy defaults, and constant distraction, you can have the best intentions and still drift in the wrong direction. Because willpower is episodic, but environment is constant. Why does environment matter so much over 30 years? Your environment shapes what behaviors feel frictionless, what behaviors are socially rewarded, and what future feels possible to you. If everyone around you eats poorly, spends impulsively, drink heavily, and think in months rather than decades, long-term thinking begins to feel extreme, even when it isn't. On the other hand, when you place yourself near people who care about their health, build things slowly, think in decades, long-term thinking begins to stop feeling like discipline and starts to feel like alignment. Surround yourself with the future you want. A powerful mental shift is this: build your present life to look like the future you want, just at a smaller scale. If you want to be healthy at 60, surround yourself by health now. If you want to be financially calm, live below your means now. If you want to be thoughtful and grounded, reduce noise, aka social media, now. You don't wait 30 years to start living that way. You move closer to it immediately, even if imperfectly. This applies to the people you spend time with, the media you consume, and the cities and homes you inhabit. Your environment trains your instincts, and your instincts compound fast. Environment is how long-term thinking becomes sustainable. 7. Think of future you as someone you love. Your future self is the offspring of your present self. And right now, you're either setting them up for freedom or handing them problems they didn't choose. If you eat well and move consistently, you're giving your future self health and autonomy. If you work patiently and invest wisely, then you give them financial flexibility. If you cherish relationships now, you won't be surprised by loneliness later. Long-term thinking becomes easier when it becomes less abstract and leverages my desire to want to take care of something. 8. You don't live on a 30-year time horizon. Here's the thing. You cannot think long-term all the time. It just creates stress and detachment from the present. Long-term thinking should be periodic, structural, and in the background. You visit it occasionally to set direction, then you come back to living. Your future is funded by how tolerable your present feels. Enjoying your life isn't optional. It's what keeps you playing the game. 9. How I apply 30-year thinking personally. Here's what it looks like in my life. I am transitioning into training for long-term health, with some aesthetic and performance training sprinkled in just to keep it enjoyable. I invest with the intention of not touching it for decades. I prioritize positive relationships and family because they compound. I'm building this YouTube channel as a timeless content library, not trend-based content. I removed social media because I knew future me wouldn't miss it. And I stopped regularly consuming alcohol because I saw the long-term health effects not worth it. None of these things were super difficult, but they just aligned with my identity and made my future life easier. 10. Do the math. 30 years sounds long until you break it down. 30 years is about 11,000 days. $500 invested every month over 30 years turns into $180,000. And that's before growth. After growth, it can be between $700,000 to $1.1 million. Training 5 to 6 times per week for 30 years is nearly 9,000 workouts. Ask yourself, what does 9,000 reps of anything turn yourself into? Almost nothing stays small for that long, which is why long-term thinking isn't about intensity. It's about direction plus patience. 30-year thinking doesn't require perfect decisions. It requires avoiding irreversible damage, staying resilient, shaping an environment that supports you, and letting compounding do its quiet work. The future isn't built through intensity. It's built through thousands of ordinary choices made easier by the life that you create. And once you see that, you stop asking yourself, what's the fastest way to win? You start asking yourself, what would guarantee me a 100% chance to win?